I think I'm going to go get a few more guys to come to class. Give me 1 second. Just have everybody get. It's a short sikha. It's a short sikha I've never learned with anybody. But it's just got a nice little message and a little punch at the end. I think it's such a radical idea that people don't believe me when I say that the Rebbe said this. This way at least you get to see it inside. The Rebbe is calling for a full-blown takeover, really. If you didn't know. Okay, so he says like this, Al Pasek. We had last week's parsha, well, this week we just finished it, we just read Vayelech. Right? There is a pasuk that says that Moshe told him to take this Sefer Torah. And Chazal said, Moshe Rabbeinu ksad yado shloshes sifrei Torah. Right, this is on the last day of Moshe's life. He wrote 13 Sifrei Torah on the last day of his life. He wrote himself 13 Sifrei Torah.
You did them in 1 day?
In 1 day. Yeah. And he did a lot of other things that day.
Superhuman.
Pretty much. He wrote 12 for the 12 tribes. The Sefer Torah and he wrote a third one that would just be found in the Aron. Right? You know that in the Ark there was a few things. There was the Sinsenes Aman, and there was the Luchos, and there was also the staff of Aron, and there was a Sefer Torah in there. In the actual Ark, there's a different opinions exactly how they structured it. And the idea is if anyone ever wanted to counterfeit and sort of say something the Torah was wrong, there was a Torah specifically put in the holiest of places, so they can always go back and copy the truth. The Torah is eternal, the stories of the Torah are eternal, and therefore there's an instruction in this little lesson. What's the Sefer Torah doing in there for all generations? And the lesson of this Maimar Razal is as follows. The reason, when it comes to why there's all different types of like prate dinim, right? In other words, unique differences in piskei dinim, right? This has to be a question that every Jew asks himself quite often, is like, how can he, who's a Sephardi, be doing the Ratzon of Hashem? And this guy's an Ashkenazi, he's doing the Ratzon of Hashem. They're doing two totally different things, and they're both like claiming like divine authority in this business, right? And they're not the same. So how does that all really work in a certain sense? So he says, when it comes to these things, and how much even more so when it comes to minhagi, which people are very exact, you do it like this, even what you wear and so forth. Yeshnam havdelim b'psika halachtit. There's differences in the psak din bein makom echad l'mishnei, between one place and another. And the way that we sort of work this out in the absence of a Sanhedrin, in the time of the Sanhedrin, is arguably it didn't exactly work like that in as much as an obvious way, because there was at least one sort of central house of decision making. But as we're going to see, it's possible that even in the days of the Sanhedrin, there were still different piskei dinim for different tribes or different groups. But the idea is that every place they're supposed to make a psak din based on the psak of their local community, right?
What's the transition? We're transitioning from writing 13 times to this?
The transition?
Yeah, we get on.
How do we get onto this? We're saying that what is the lesson that we learn from this story in the Torah? That Moshe wrote 13 Torahs and he put one in the Aron, so that it shouldn't be counterfeited, right? And he's saying he's going into a discussion now where that's going to sort of be our launching point. So we didn't really see the full connection yet. And he says, so there's differences in one psak and another, and even more so in minhagim. In each place you're supposed to go according to that place. Shakin eilu be'elu divrei Elokim chaim. The truth is each one is the truth of God. It's the word of the living God. Mishum shaTorah nitna lehidaresh bechlal uprat uprati pratios. This is a quote from the introduction of Tanya, where it says the Torah is really intended to be learned in a way of klal and prat, and prati pratios, which means if you knew how to look into the Torah properly, you could find really yourself in there and things which are only shaykh to you. A person could really know everything there is to know about themselves if you knew how to look into the Torah deeper and deeper and deeper and find yourself in the Torah. There's an Indian of like finding your name in the Torah, finding your tafkid in the Torah. It's if you know how to deepen your ways into there, the Torah is sort of personal for you. What's that? No, in Kol Torah Kula, right? How to learn Torah to find yourself. Well, that's the point. The Alter Rebbe says in the beginning of Tanya when he brings this out that it's sort of a lost art in a certain sense, right? What does he say over there? That's why I'm writing this book, because those who really can't find themselves in the Torah, this book will be sort of a way for them to find themselves. I'm writing a book which is sort of relevant to all. You might not be able to go and find your unique place, but I sort of provided you here with something which could be a substitute. I like to call it like a hack. You know, there's certain things that weren't available before. I was actually saying to someone this morning in a class that the whole idea of a hack is like a modern technological term, right? What's a hack? In 1600s, was there a hack? I don't think you could hack anything. The idea is that there's certain like ways that you can you can bypass like the Seder Ishtalshlus basically and arrive at the same goal by sort of going in this unique pathway. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. We got to a point where I'm going to provide you with a hack to find yourself in the Torah, even though this process would actually take you a deep dive into klal and prat and prati pratios. Here's the answers to all your questions. This is actually what he says in the beginning of the time. Right? The kol neshama pratis yesh adam hamushreshes ba'oso prasha b'Torah. Every single person has a letter in the Sefer Torah. It's not a joke, right? There's 600,000 root souls. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. How many letters are actually in the Torah? You ever count? It's supposed to be 600,000 letters in the Torah. If you count, you come to a little bit more than half of that. But the way that that's sort of resolved, I saw one time the Rebbe say, is that the vowels are not written in the Torah. In other words, like when you have a or an u, you can write a vav or you can write an aleph. So all those things, there are actually more letters that are like sort of silent letters, which are, if you add them all up, you get to 600,000. And each one of those letters is a yid. And therefore, even if you have a mem and I have a mem, but your mem is part of one word, and it's one parsha, and therefore through the eyes of that mem, you're seeing the entire Torah from the perspective of that parsha, that mem. That's your soul. Like you have a completely different perspective of the entire Torah, depending on what letter you are, where you are. So every Jew has a unique, intrinsic, like private view of the whole Torah, and if any one of those views are missing, the whole Torah is puzzle. So each and every individual yid has like this eternal significance and a private part of Torah. If you could find it, you'd basically be like this enlightened, glowing letter of which give chizuk to the whole Am Yisrael. He says, but basically every soul has this prat where he's rooted inside of the Torah. And the truth is, if you're this mem and you're going to try and do what that mem over there is doing, you're really not following the Torah properly. There's not one Torah for all in that sense. There's even halachically, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It's pretty extreme. You could do the halachim written in the Shulchan Aruch, and it's wrong for you because that's not your Shulchan Aruch. Right? And Eilu Veilu, Divrei Elokim Chaim. Your soul is rooted in another place. You have to do something different. Keinu Adavar B'Yisterev Zabenogei LePratei Chovos HaLevavos. This is the same. Basically, this is based on the introduction of the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, right? Because he says the same Kol Shekain over there. If that's true regarding halachic matters, how much more so when it comes to more sophisticated duties of the heart? In other words, if you're supposed to be a Sephardi in this halacha and this is an Ashkenazi, that's like sort of a chitzonius thing. What about your unique way of loving God? Or are you a fearer of God? Is your sphere a tiferet? Or is it netzach? Like you have when it comes to your divine devotion to Hashem, even halacha, you're even supposed to be like different than your fellow. Certainly in your like climbing the Jacob's ladder into heaven, each one has a very, very unique path which is shaykh only for them. Right? Havoda penimis of Ava and Yira, the deeper service of love and fear of God. You can't just copy the other guy. You have your own heart. Motzim behem hevdelim rabim. We find many, many different ways. Right? There's so many different. Look in the Tanya. He explains over there. He talks about Shammai and Hillel, how they have a different soul root, and it winds up that their whole life as Jews is completely different. L'chol echad yesh shar mishalo. Each one has his own gate. Shal yado hu misal miskasher b'elukus, and through that gate and that gate alone, he must connect to godliness. It's reminding me of the famous vort that the Rebbe says every time you read a Chassidus Maimer. It tells you that Rosh Hashanah is the greatest day of the year. That's when you can find the Atzmus and the Melech and the Malchus, and you can't find it any other day. And all of a sudden you get to Yom Kippur, and it's even more so, and you get to Sukkot, and even more so. Like, which one's true? Which is the holiest day of the year? And it says they're all true. It depends where you're standing. And it's called the Shar. In fact, the Gematria of Tzfat is Shar, because when the Arizal walked into this town, we know exactly where he was. Actually, he was near the Red Khan. He was with his student, Chaim Vital, and he said, Zeh Shar HaShamayim. He basically said this is sort of like the replacement of Jerusalem for the time being in Gullus. Zeh Shar HaShamayim. This is the gateway of heaven. And the Gematria of Tzfat is Shar, and all of the Arizal's works are called Shar HaGilgulim, Shar Zeh, everything's a different Shar. Because basically, you have to go through a gate in order to meet your Maker, right? And this is true about your life. You have a Shar. And if you don't know what it is, you're kind of in trouble. You can't get into the gates of Mashiach, of the Beis HaMikdash. He says, "Ulam zeu rak b'kesher lepratim upratim mesuyamim." He says this has to do with certain details. Kamo be'inyan tefillah. For example, let's look at davening. Yedua shenuschos hatefillah hashonos novos mikach sheyud gimel yishtachavayus ha'mikdash neged yud gimel sharav shenirmezu la'asid. So he says, right, this is in the introduction of the English Siddur. It's a very, very popularized idea. I believe it's the source of this introduction from that Siddur. It comes from this Sikha, which is in 1955, where he explains that all the different nusachs of tefillah, and he says in the bottom here, in some footnote, the Rebbe went through 60 different nuschos that were in front of the Alter Rebbe when he made his Siddur. So there's at least 60 like legit different nuschos of different communities that are all like perfectly aligned according to Kabbalah. They're like true and emes dika prayer books, right? And he says each one flows out. The original number of prayer books, how many were there? 13. There's like 13 original prayer books. Because each one of these 13 prayer ways of praying, ways of finding your way into the Mikdash were based on the 13 different forms of bowing down. There's 13 unique ways of prostrating yourself before Hashem. It sounds like a yoga class or something, lahavdil, right? Like you get into a certain position, and it's like according to your specific tribe. And those 13 ways of prostrating yourself is where prayer language comes from. And it was based on the 13 gates of the Beis HaMikdash. Each one was aligned with a different way in. Shnei Masar Sharim Liyud Beis Hashvatim. There was 12 gates for the 12 tribes, Shar Ruven, Shar Shimon, etc. And of course the Shar HaShlosh Esrei, who Shar HaKolel, right? There's this idea of the 13th gate, the Kol HaShvatim, that if, for example, you knew that you were from the tribe of Ruven, you should not go into the 13th gate, because you have a better way to get into the Beis HaMikdash. You have a unique prat, which is your way to elevate to Hashem. It's your way into God. But for example, if you're a ger, or if you don't know what tribe you're from, or some kind of a mishap in your lineage, then you could still go into the Beis HaMikdash. You might think you can't go in because you don't have a gate, and you need a gate to get in, but there's this thing called the 13th gate, and here's where he's connecting it with the Torah, right at the beginning of the Sikha. He's saying that where does the idea of a 13th gate come from? There's actually 13 Torahs. And what he's trying to tell you is that not every Torah is the same. The Torah that Shimon took and the Torah that Levi and Yehuda took, they was the same letters. But why do they have to have their own Torah? Because really it was like a simon that they have their own Torah. They have their own piskei dinim. They have different psak din. They had their own way of basically praying and finding their way into God. It's a real thing. Not everyone's the same. But there was the 13th gate, the Shar HaKolel. And there it was for all the Shvatim. And he says, Nusach HaTefillah shu l'chol Yisrael b'shaveh, which means there is one way of bowing down, which is equal to all Jews, right? It's like the Torah that was inside of the actual Aron, that anyone was going to try and counterfeit. Here's the original, which means all these different 12 things. This is one where they all come from. This is the one that they have in common. They're versions of this original gate. Now, even though you should not take advantage of that 13th gate, if you know your individual tribe, because there's an advantage of like finding your actual self in the Torah. In other words, if you could do without the Tanya, and you could do all the work that the Alter Rebbe is telling, that find the klal and prat and prati pratius, and if you could like find it on your own, you really don't need the Alter Rebbe to get you there, because you got there, you know your gate. But he says, that was in a time when each one actually knew their gate. Therefore, therefore everyone should have entered into their own gate. This is very radical words, especially we have a few Sephardim over here, and Ashkenazim, and Teimanim, and everybody else. You're not gonna believe what the Rebbe says over here. Literally, you won't believe it. He said, "Bizman hazeh, kishelo yodim lanu hashvatim." We don't really know the Shvatim, right? Some people have very, very old lineage, Baruch Hashem, and they have. Some people even are almost positive. Let's say that, for example, that they're Kohanim. By the way, halachically speaking, we don't hold by such a thing, because we don't give you truma, and we don't give challah. So there's like, even the Rebbe sometimes would point to a person and say you're a Kohen. We have problems with the din of the. I mean, you guys have it pretty good with all the edus and edus and edus, but really the etzem dika edus that you need, it has to be viewed by those who were sitting in the base of Mikdash, and there was a certain set of edi that had to be checking people every day to actually be a verifiable Kohen. Now it's like by tradition, and we take that tradition very seriously, but we don't go so far as to actually give truma, right? There's different reasons for it, but it's because even if you know who your tribe is, what he's saying, right? In this time, we don't really know the tribes. He says, and even those who do know what tribe they come from, like Kohanim and Levim, it's better nowadays, they should actually nowadays not go through their own gate. Not for the reasons that I said, by the way, because we're not sure. The Rebbe says, even those who are sure. And like I said to you, there were certain people that the Rebbe actually told them, you're a Kohen. They didn't know they were a Kohen. If the Rebbe tells you you're a Kohen, it's as good as Mamash God telling you you're a Kohen. There are actually people, we know they're Kohanim. So maybe they should maintain a certain nusach and a tradition that they had from time immemorial. He says, nowadays, when we're just a bunch of, like Balagan has set into Am Yisrael, well, there's a lot of Kohanim at this table, I better be careful with myself, right? That the Balagan has set in. He says, even if you do know your own tribe, for sure, you should go into the Shar HaKolel. And what is the Shar HaKolel? He says, this is the Nusach Shetikena Arizal. This is the Nusach that the Arizal here in this holy city of Sfas, the Shar HaKolel, right? The Sfas is Gematria Shar, it's the Shar. And he established a certain Nusach that no matter what how sure you are of your unique path, something took place in Am Yisrael which diverts you from that path, and you should go through his path.
What are the 13 ways of bowing down? Do we know what that is?
I don't know.
No?
I'm saying that I think it's like a lost, like each tribe had their own gemstone, and they had their own like sort of clothing and their own flag, like they had their own Shulchan Aruch, right? They had different halachas that were shaykh to them, and they had their own ways of communing with Hashem. The whole point is we don't really know the pratim, I would imagine that amongst those 60 sidurim that the Rebbe looked at, the Alter Rebbe, when he made his siddur, which is essentially the most authentic version of the Arizal siddur. That's what we call it, Nusach Ari. Just because the Arizal, didn't actually write a siddur. The Arizal just explained what a siddur should look like al pi Kabbalah. But the actual compilation of a siddur really was done finally and with the full gusto by the Alter Rebbe. That's why when you say a Chabad siddur, it says Nusach Arizal. Because he did the same thing, by the way, with the osios of the Torah. That there's something called the way that the Arizal decided that the letters should be written. The ksav, the actual script, is different and unique and based on Kabbalah. The only problem is that his letters based on Kabbalah, it's very hard to actually draw them on a piece of paper. It's like you have to be like a mystic to actually draw a letter like that. Sometimes the Kabbalah sort of got in the way of the practical writing. So the Alter Rebbe, where did he come out with? He has this ksav, right? You ever heard of this thing called ksav, Alter Rebbe ksav? Who told you to write another script? You know what I'm saying? That's a big thing to take on yourself, to decide that the calligraphy of writing the letters, you're going to invent a new one. He didn't invent a new one. It's the same thing he did with the Alter Rebbe siddur. He just made a way to actually bring these Kabbalistic concepts onto the page. So the nusach of the Alter Rebbe is essentially the true nusach of the Arizal. He just was the one who was able to concretize it into an actual finite thing in the physical world.
There is Arizal Ksav in this.
There's Arizal Ksav, but yeah, the difference is that there's going to be certain difficulties that were compromises that were made when the Arizal said like this, but you can't really make a letter that looks like that. They decided on a certain way of doing it. Just like there was actually sidders called the Arizal Siddur before the Alter Rebbe came into the town. It was people who tried to make a siddur of the Arizal, but what's the authentic siddur of the Arizal? So that's what the Alter Rebbe basically is like. I'll help you guys out with this. I'll bring it down. In any case, so when it comes to prayer, he says you should go with this 13th gate, which is, even if you have. My family's been using this siddur for 3,000 years, dude, and like we know our gate. Even if you know your gate, even if you know your tribe, which is suspect. But let's say you know your tribe. The Rebbe is saying here, switch over to the common gate for the moment. This is what the situation we're in. Al derek zehu, but that's the light stuff. He's about to say something like truly radical here. He says al derek zehu gam b'Torah. He says the truth is also in Torah. In other words, we just went from sort of the chovos halavavos, which is the duties of the heart, like how you align, like climb up sort of the spiritual ladder with certain words and letters. Prayer book, simple prayer book. What about Torah? What about this thing we said before about there's different piskei dinim? There's Fardi, there's Ashkenazi, right? There's Teimani. They go with the Rambam Bechlal. Like there's all kinds of different ways of making a psak din in Torah, and they're all good and they're all holy. They all come from the ancient days. The Rebbe says over here, when it comes to Torah, hein galya the Torah, hein pnimius Torah. Whether you're talking about a Shulchan Aruch or you're talking about the secrets of Torah, since we don't know exactly what root we come from, you have to go through the common gate. In other words, when it comes to Psak Din, Reuven had his own Shulchan Aruch, Shimon had his own Shulchan Aruch, and they literally practiced the Torah differently, totally the right way, each one for them. But those days are gone. And the Alter Rebbe, he says, was chosen, right? He points to the Hakadama of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, where his children write about him, how the Maggid chose him amongst all the other great masters of that time to write a Shulchan Aruch. Again, Mr. Alter Rebbe, where did you come from? Who needs a Shulchan Aruch? We have one. Like, it's just the same thing. Why are you making us a prayer book? We have one. Why are you making us new letters, how to write the letters? We have one. The Alter Rebbe was a freak of nature. You have to understand. He was not just a man who walked the earth. He was like this Shar HaKolel. He came with gifts. And he's like, I have a siddur for you. I have new writing for you. I have a new Shulchan Aruch for you. And I have Chassidus. Right? And what the Rebbe is saying is this was not an optional situation. He was coming to say, because the world has gotten so confused, you don't know who you are, you have to rely on that 13th Torah. And this is not just a prayer book, this is the Shulchan Aruch. And he put together a Shulchan Aruch, levarer es halachos b'gali the Torah, in order to clarify the actual laws of the Torah, nigla. Yasad es Torah's Chassidus Chabad, and then also in the spiritual realms of Torah. He basically organized the Pnimius of Torah, like once and for all. This is because if you learn Kabbalah, you'll find various and many different opinions on how to explain certain things. Like what is the tzimtzum? What is the tzimtzum arishon? Is it kipshuto, lav kipshuto? In Kabbalah, it's not like it's so simple that there's like one opinion. So when the Arizal himself was sort of a posek in Kabbalah, but then there became very many branches of how to understand the Arizal himself. The Alter Rebbe clarified positions on so many different topics, and he put it down. It's like it's a Pesak Din, as it were, in Pnimius HaTorah. Right? And with the Pnimius HaTorah, of course, in Avodas Hashem, because Pnimius HaTorah is not just something you learn, it's a certain way you live by as well. And he also clarified a nusach of tefillah, right? He made a prayer book, he made a Shulchan Aruch, and he made a Tanya. Nusach klali matim lekol adam. Shekol shloshim yanim eileh. He says all these three things that the Alter Rebbe's neshama chadasha. Let's remind ourselves that there were certain souls that were born for the first time and they never reincarnated. And those souls were like the massive, like literally giants of like the original man that walked the earth. They had the first time a soul was used, and then every time they got reincarnations, they came back and they came back and they came back. And the Baal Shem Tov proclaimed In 1700, a new soul was going to be born. A soul that was never born in another body before. It was like mamash. That's why I said, if he was a prophet, he would have been the greatest prophet. If he was one of the avos, he would have been one of the avos. He had like us, one of those souls that like was the original souls. It was held back to be given to us at like the later days because we needed this 13th gate to get us through the situation. We don't understand what the Alter Rebbe is. Like we're sitting here in yeshiva sort of hacking away. The Rebbe's trying to tell us in black and white here. Are we listening? You know? Don't forget, you think, oh, because this guy's an Ashkenazi, so he's wants to do what the Alter Rebbe says. Guess what? The Alter Rebbe is not an Ashkenazi, he's not a Sephardi. That's what the Arizal himself, he married a Sephardi, Ashkenazi. Like we're going past the point of our particulars. For the sake of Klal Yisrael, at the end of days, there seems to be this need to sort of unite under one banner and sort of lose our independent identity. And in order to be safe that we're not counterfeiting it, you got to go for that 13th Torah that Moshe had in the ark. And this is the Alter Rebbe. This is what this man is. It's not what you think. And therefore he says these three things are fit for every single Jew. Kol echad mehem. In other words, through these gates that the Alter Rebbe brought us, these gifts, all the aliyahs, which is tefillah, and all the hamshachas, which is the Torah and avoda, can be accomplished. And look what the Rebbe says, we should go on the clear path, the hack, that this Rebbe gave us, and nafitzo so lekol bnei Yisrael, we should spread it to every single Jew. Look what he says here. Gam inyani hashulchan aruch v'nuchsach hatefillah. Whoever told you ever hear a Chabadnik? You're never going to hear a Chabadnik not tell you, go spread Chassidus, go spread Chassidus. He said, but I'm Ashkenazi, I'm Sephardi. It doesn't matter. Go spread Chassidus. It's our thing, right? We're not going to be stopped. We're going to spread Chassidus. The Rebbe says here, it's not just Chassidus. You have to spread the Siddur and the Alter Shulchan Aruch with the same gusto. Like, if you want Mashiach to come, you have to get everyone to hold by the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and live by it, and to hold by the Nusach HaTefillah of the Alter Rebbe. But this is a radical position, my friends. You don't hear people saying this much. This is in Dalid of the Kurtei Sichos. The Rebbe's not hiding it. The Rebbe was radical. We're afraid to hold his positions publicly because when he says it, it's one thing. If you're going to say it, you better be reading it word by word out of a book, or you're a lunatic. You know what I'm saying? You're like, Mama's like making like war here instead of peace. You should spread it to every Jew, even the Shulchan Aruch, even the Tefillah. It's all part of what we call Hafatzas HaMayanos. When you talk about that the Mashiach told Baal Shem Tov, Mashiach will come, Hafatzas HaMayanosecha, that is three things. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidus, his Shulchan Aruch, and his Siddur. Therefore, then we will be promised that through Hafatzas HaMayanosecha Chutza, Yikasei Mar, Mashiach will come, Dal Malka Mashiach B'Karov. Mamish. Isn't that crazy? I never get to teach this because it's a one-offer, but I figured you guys deserve it. All right. Sorry, I'm just a messenger. Do not shoot the messenger.